Welcome, everyone. This is the week of lifespan development, and this is the content recording to go with that content. Okay, so what is lifespan development? It's this idea of the science of growth, change, and stability from conception until death. So just the different phases that we go through, science has dictated certain phases to be pretty unanimous among all humans, and that's the different phases we're going to review today, and also how those different phases, how our genetics interact with how we explore our environment when we are younger, and then also um, how we extend out as we are getting older and just change and grow depending upon um, the different things that are affecting us, whether it's family, friends, were our parents around and taking care of us, or were we more so taking care of ourselves? All those different things can affect how we develop, as we've already reviewed. But it's also pretty cool to identify a few kind of unanimous parts that every human goes through. And if we experience a certain um, confounding variable during this time, such as for a traumatic event or a parent walking out, this can affect our growth later on, as not our physical growth, but our mental and emotional growth as we go along. So it's very much looking at nature and nurture and how those interact. And also, there might be some gender differences. Not as many as you might think, but there are a few. Um, and just a general question, what about if you identify as a different gender from the body you were born in? How does that affect your growth? And universally, lifespan development has been researched in the United States and or in the U.S. and Europe, and we're looking at what they classify as average American families, and usually having two parents. Only more so recently, in the past 20 years, they've been developing more research based on um, uh, two moms, two dads, or transgender, and how all that intersects. But we don't have anything specific out about how if you are born transgender and you are still searching for yourself, how that can affect your growth. If you were born in a male body but you identify as female and you want to have that full experience, how does that affect everything? So that is still research that's being done, because we have to kind of grow out our sample pool and get a different sort of population in to evaluate and observe your development. And also, when someone is transitioning, it's often a very delicate time. Maybe they don't want scientists asking them probing questions or following them around as you would for some of these other studies. So it's just kind of this idea of we don't know much except what people tell us who experience this. And so this lifespan development section is basically a breakdown of lifespan development um, from um, males who are born male and females who are born females, without any sort of differentiation between different genders and all of that. Okay, so we start with prenatal development. Prenatal care is very important. Medical care during pregnancy is usually done by prenatal doctors, and they look at both the health of the mother and the fetus. And these prenatal nurses and doctors are mainly worried about the risk of complications to the mother and fetus. So, for example, um, that's why it's recommended that women do not drink alcohol while they are carrying a child. They can take certain medications, but it has to be approved by their doctor, and that's because certain medications can create side effects. And these types of changes or things that can affect the fetus is known as a teratogen. It can be biological, chemical, or physical, that can cause damage to that developing embryo. And this is because there are critical periods during the development of the fetus that if it's exposed to a certain chemical agent or environmental agent, it can affect that growth. So when specific parts or organs develop, it can affect how that development takes place. Okay, so in this section, we're going to review development, that concept of development, how to study it, and also if development occurs in stages or if it's continuous. So here is a look at continuous development versus discontinuous development. So this is a bit of a contention point in most psychology, sociology circles. Some believe that we go through a very specific process and phases, and if we do not hit each milestone, we cannot continue on to the next, or each milestone is important to complete, and we have this critical period in which we complete it. So this is on the side of discontinuous development. So we have these very specific phases from infancy, toddlerhood, childhood, and then into adulthood. And then we have this other idea of continuous development, and that development continues from infancy to adulthood and maybe even beyond. And this concept of continuous development can kind of be seen as going uphill, slowly going uphill progression, where discontinuous development, you see it in more concrete stages. So, such as if you look at, stepping stones, and how those are they're in a specific place and extends you, it helps you go up and down along the slope, and they have a very distinct starting and stopping point. An example of this is with language learning. So it was always often believed that someone who is learning a second language, it happens, mostly happens during toddlerhood and while they're children, because as we learned in the chapter about biology, neurogenesis, which is the development of different cells, this happens on overload when we are first born and into childhood. We have all these different neural pathways, and after a while, our brain pares down those pathways to only those that we use. So in this way, during infancy and early childhood, language learning is actually the easiest because we have all these different roadmaps. And if we keep practicing or encouraging that second language or third language, then eventually the child that language will withstand the pruning period and will keep that neural pathway if it is used regularly. Now, with continuous development, the idea is that there isn't really this period of time that makes it easier or harder to complete language, but we do know that it has been leaning more towards discontinuous development with language learning. Now, in adulthood, you can learn a second language. I'm not saying that, but it's so much easier to learn it, a second language, when you are a child. And so suggesting that certain things are more likely to happen in one stage versus another. So here is kind of depiction of continuous development. So a tree, a small sapling growing into this large tree. While discontinuous development, they have very specific stages of the ladybug right here is depicted, and it has it changes form, it changes its appearance, and maybe the biological constructs of it. While the in the continuous development phase, it's always that same tree. So we have three big domains in the study of lifespan development. The first is physical development, and this occurs throughout our life. So it's that process of going through puberty, that process of going through menopause, and then death and dying. We also have cognitive. This suggests that our brain is 80% developed by age 4, and Piaget suggests that formal operations, which in this it means complex thinking, complex thought, starts at 11 years old. So looking at that again, cognitive suggests that our brain is 80% developed by age 4. So that means our neural pathways are all pretty much formed and linked, and we just have to hone them and become better at going through those neural pathways. Social emotional, so a big part of it happens infancy due to attachment to the mother. This is a big topic in psychology, especially in childhood psychology, looking at how attachment can affect how the child interacts with others in childhood, but also in adulthood. All right, so here is Piaget's theory of cognitive development. It's broken up into specific stages. So we have the sensory motor stage, the pre-operational reasoning stage, concrete operational, and formal operational. So sensory motor stage is within that first 2 years of life, and it is the concept of using your senses to interact with your environment, and you use from reflexes to change behaviors to object permanence. So this idea of having when an object is shown and taken away, how the child interacts with that. Then we also have pre-operational thinking dominated by perception, but the child is capable of becoming used to more symbolic functioning. For a child when a child is closer to age 6 and 7, if you have 2 cups, one round and shallow, another one tall and thin, if you transport water from one cup to another and ask the question, is there still the same amount of water in this cup versus that cup? Child that is closer to 6 or 7 will say it's the same, while a child who is closer to 2 and 3 will say that the tall, thin cup has more water than the shallow, round, wide cup. So then we move on to concrete operational, so 6 or 7 to 11 or 12 years old, and logical reasoning that is applied to objects that are real or can be seen. So we haven't developed the complex thought process yet. And that only happens around 11 or 12. And this is called the formal operational stage. So individuals can think logically about potential events or abstract ideas. So here is stages of the fetal development, more so for you to have an idea of. So going from 9 weeks to 40 weeks. This is also an example of listing the teratogens that affect development of certain structures. So the green area is there could be major defects in structures, very likely, but also miscarriage may occur if this teratogen is exposed. And the purple section talks about psychological defects. Minor defects in structures are more likely, but that miscarriage can still occur as well. These are different types of teratogens, so alcohol, nicotine, caffeine, cocaine, marijuana, certain infections such as Zika, syphilis, measles, COVID-19, and certain environmental factors such as radiation or mercury. So we have this idea of having a specific attachment to a parent, and often it is associated with the mother. But in today's day and age, it could be just the person that is the caregiver. So it is the main psychosocial developmental milestone of infancy to see if you have this secure attachment, which is what you want. This means that if your mother walks away from you, you might feel a little upset, but you also are confident in yourself to be able to take care of yourself. Resistant attachment is more, you may not want your parent back once they come back to see you. So if your parent leaves you, you might not want them to come back and hold you or touch you. Avoidant attachment, you may actively avoid them once they come back and see you again, just to kind of show that you don't really care. And of course, this is happening in the toddler mindset. And then there's also disorganized attachment, where sometimes when your parent goes away and then comes back, maybe you run to them all happy and smiles, and maybe other times you avoid them, and other times you get physically or actually angry, and maybe strike out or yell or scream. So those are more disorganized attachment. So here is an image of two different brain scans. The one on the left is a brain scan of someone who goes through extreme neglect, and the one on the right is the normal brain scan. And the point of this picture is to showcase that any sort of mistreatment by caregivers or parents, guardians, whatever it may be, can lead to changes in the brain, and also just permanent damage in the brain that can affect how we process emotions, how we react to certain situations, all of those things. So looking back again at Piaget's cognitive development, this is just another little slide about it. So sensory motor period, pre-operations, concrete operations, and formal operations. And then a little bit more about it as well. This is just to give you a good idea of how to understand this whole process. Okay, so Erikson's theory goes across the lifespan from birth until old age. Unfortunately, has little research supporting it because it's very theoretical, but it's something that many people enjoy believing in and want to apply and believe that this is what happens, just because it makes sense, but we can't really test it. So it's this concept that how we interact with others affects our sense of self. So our peers and our culture define us, inform our identity. So personality development would take place through the lifespan, with our interactions with others playing a key central part. At each stage of life, there's a conflict that we need to resolve within ourselves before we can move forward. So here are these psychological stages of development as developed by Erikson. So the big one here that I always find interesting is The fifth stage from 12 to 18, identity versus confusion. So this is a time period, and if you're thinking of yourself, you know it makes sense, where you often experiment with different things. It could be drugs, alcohol, it could be sex, it could be religion, it could be belief systems, and develop certain identity and roles and feel drawn to certain things and kind of form this concrete view. Before that, you're still kind of figuring it out, but in this period of time, you really try to figure out who you are, and the more confident you are in your identity, often the better off you are later on down the road, just because you have that rooted belief system. So this just goes through all those different stages and how this sort of conflict, there's a conflict at each stage that we go through. So we also have Lawrence Kohlberg's moral development, and he looked at how we react to certain situations as humans, and that we often, certain people believe that if you do something wrong, then you have to deal with the consequences, while others believe that there is a social duty. So even if someone isn't watching, you have to still do this social duty. And then still others have this post-conventional level of belief, which is that no matter what, you stand for your beliefs, even if it goes against the grain or goes against law. So like the Black Lives Matter movement, this would be definitely on this level of personal beliefs, especially when there are police officers who are tear gassing or, arresting people in the movement. This is, gives conflicting responses, because there are many highly supportive Black Lives Matter people in politics, in the media, celebrities, and still by the police, they are often shut down. The Black Lives Matter movement is often shut down. So just this confounding variable of, is what I'm doing is right, because it is, my personal beliefs, and eventually society will change in order to adapt to this personal belief style. So yet again, to reiterate, pre-conventional level, you pay for what you do, so having those consequences no matter what. And then we have social duty. We must abide by the social system, even if there isn't anyone around us to dictate it, just because we have this social duty to do that. So we also have a specific self-concept around parenting styles, and how certain parenting styles can affect how we develop. So the first is authoritarian. This is very strict, often compared to a drill sergeant mentality. We have authoritative. It's kind of the balance between permissive and authoritarian. So permissive is laissez-faire and lenient. So authoritative is this balance between permissive or lenient and authoritarian, very strict. And then there's also uninvolved, which is more so not around or uncaring, maybe an absent parent. Okay, so we have also these different types of coping styles, and this is developed by Horney's coping styles. So the first one, the coping style, is moving towards people. And an example of this would be if a child is seeking positive attention and affection from a parent. And it can also be transferred to being an adult needing love. And this is showcase because we are looking for that care and concern that maybe we hadn't gotten when we were in childhood, whatever that may be. Another coping style is moving against people. This could be a child fighting or bullying other children, adult who is abrasive and verbally hurtful, or who exploits others. This could still yet be because a parent is not showing care and concern for their child, but instead of the child seeking comfort, they move away from comfort and often show aggression and that manipulation. And then we also have moving away from people. So this same situation can cause the child to withdraw from the world and isolate. The adult feels like a loner. So kind of detachment and isolation is how they move away from people, and it's how they cope with whatever they're going through. So these are three very general types of coping styles that people experience, and usually it can arise from the same situation. So if there's a traumatic event, a child can react in these three big ways. And we see it all the time. Bullying in school, often the child who bullies was bullied themselves. People who are uh, looking for affection and needing love, maybe they are constantly on social media, having a bunch of friends around them, this idea of just seeking that positive attention. So during adolescence, we as teenagers move beyond concrete thinking and become capable of abstract thought. And this is also a very important time in which we question authority or challenge established societal norms. So anyone who says that, this teenager is not being normal, or, you should not rebel so much, this is a very natural part of being human. We kind of test boundaries and see through trial and error what our belief system is and how we develop it. Okay. That is all I'm going to review because those are the major theories. I may post another video later on, but this gives you at least the basics of lifespan development. So just email me with any questions.